Once again, we're in Author's Corner, and pleased to welcome Marianna Albritton, who has written a great book called Come Climb Toward God. Marianne, thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. It's my joy.
I love that. It's my joy. And I can tell you're a joyful person, by the way, because we've talked off the air, and that you really do have that persona that, you know what, and it kind of goes along, it doesn't kind of, it goes along with your book, that to me, you seem as though in talking with you, you seem content. Is that because of your love of God and your belief?
Yes, my joy comes from knowing Jesus and having a personal relationship with him, and it just flows. I can't explain it.
And what made you decide you were going to write this book?
I've been teaching ladies' Bible studies and Sunday school and conferences for about 50 years now. And when I teach in my local church, and I'm teaching every week, I have various subjects. And when I've taught this subject about how to have a personal relationship with God, how to recognize when he's calling us to a step closer to him, when I give that Bible study, the people come up to tell me this study has helped me more than any study that we've had. And my sister-in-law, Janice, would tell me, you need to write a book. And then different people would say, you need to write a book. So I finally got up the courage and attempted. So that's how the book came into being.
I love it. And again, we're speaking with Marianna Albritton, and she's written a book called Come Climb Toward God. The subtitle, I'm going to throw that out for all of you. Are you hungry for God? So what does that mean, are you hungry for God?
In every person, there's a vacuum. There's a hole that only God can fill in your spirit, in your soul. And people feel this hunger, and they don't know what it is. And so they begin searching, and they need a way to find out what that hunger means, and to come to the realization, this is God trying to get in touch with me and have fellowship with me, have a relationship with me, know me. And so many people have this hunger, and they don't know what to do with it. They don't know how to respond. And so I'm hoping that this book can get out there in the world and answer this question for people and help them on their route to finding God as a real person and understanding that Jesus is real and he wants to be part of your life. And it's a delightful life. When you have a relationship with Jesus, it's delightful.
It's interesting because you talk about that hole, and a lot of people are talking about it. So when you say, are you hungry for God, it fills that void. It's like what you're talking about, the void.
Yeah.
For you to write this book, you had to be kind of vulnerable, didn't you? Was that tough?
I did. I had planned to write it as I taught it, strictly by reading the topics and discussing the scriptures. But as I began to write it, God didn't let me get by with that. I had to open up myself and be vulnerable. And in being vulnerable and explaining some of my experiences, which were positive and some were negative, which I believe helps people to identify, it was a whole new experience opening up myself to be vulnerable. But that's where connection with other people comes in. They need to know that God is there in their experiences, and that's part of finding out our calling from him. And a lot of people ask, what does God want me to do? And so experimenting with different types of service for God we find the answer to that question, and we do have to be vulnerable and able to be able to answer that question.
Boy, isn't that true? You do have to be vulnerable. Did you find that from all the years of the ladies' Bible studies groups? What was it like running those?
Well, everyone has a different connection to God, and everybody has different desire to have a closeness with God. Some people want to be really close to God. Some people are content to kind of have a distance from God. But I've tried to teach to the individual, because God is very individual-minded. I say that if a person wants to know God, to find out who God really is, then he will move heaven and earth to get to that person. I've seen him do that so many times. He'll do what he has to do to get to that person.
Wow. So people listening to this, when you say, I've seen that happen with a few people, can give us an example? That's great.
A lady came to me for counseling, and she was on the verge of trying to decide whether or not to commit suicide, because some religious leader had told her that she was going to have to really suffer for the sins that she had committed. And that was so tragic. And God sent her to me so that I could tell her God loved her, God forgives her if she asks forgiveness, and therefore remedy that mindset, take away that mindset. And so here I was. I lived in a very remote area at that time, but that particular lady had a friend who knew me, and the friend told her, I know a lady I think can help you. And so she brought her to see me, and we had a good discussion about God. So in that respect, God moved all obstacles that was in her way and got her to me, even though I lived in the backwoods of nowhere. So he's very good at doing that kind of thing, whatever it takes to get to a person.
Wow, I love that. I love that story. So that had to make you feel good, right?
Oh, yes.
Wow.
It's a wonderful privilege to be a servant of the Lord and to be able to direct people to Jesus. It's really awesome. And for just a little country girl, just in my own sight, just a nobody, for God to use me in His service to help people, that is so wonderful. It's so fantastic.
Marianna, what do you hope that people get out of what do you hope that people get out of reading your book?
I'm hoping that if they do not know Jesus personally, that they will ask Him into their lives and become believers in Him. And then after that, I'm hoping that they can develop that relationship with Him, that when He calls them, that they will be willing to say yes to God and move forward, always moving forward in a deeper relationship with Him. I always tell people, even if you don't understand completely what's going on, always say yes to God. Because when you say yes, it gives Him permission to work in your life.
And you've seen it. You gave us the example, and you said you've seen this so many times over and over again. I want to tell everybody they can pick up your book, Come Climb Toward God. Are You Hungry for God? Marianna Albritton. You can find it easily on Amazon.com. Wow, a woman of strong faith who has seen what's happened in action to many of the people around her. Thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
And thanks to everybody for listening to this version of the show and Author's Corner as well.